And this also takes me to photography. I remember taking a class about photography just so I could understand how to make beautiful pictures. And then I realized that photography is about taking picture of the light. And then
Mm,
when I was reading your melanin book, it brought me back to photography, because photography is about capturing the light. And
mm-hmm.
then when they teach you about the light spectrum, it also makes you understand melanin. And then when you say, for example, that there are the best times to look at the sun,
Mm-hmm.
your eyes need sun and they need to absorb sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same hours as photography. In photography, they have these hours they call the magic hours, which is the sunrise, the little time of the sunrise, and then the little time of the sunset. Those are the magic hours when
Yeah.
the photographers can capture pictures and get the most beautiful pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you also say that since we absorb light because of melanin, and our eyes also need to absorb light, then the best hours to absorb that light in our eyes, just like in the camera lens of a photographer, is those hours. Can you talk
Right.
about that? It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's so fascinating and it's so interesting to learn. When I was learning about, how the eyes absorb light and then that's what activates our pineal gland, I was like, wow, because doctors tell us that we shouldn't look at the sun, and doctors tell us that the sun is bad for our eyes and that sort of stuff. So when I'm learning this stuff, it's literally the opposite to what I was taught. But then, as the part that we're talking about is the sunrise and sunset, and I like the term that you use. It's like the magical hours. That is the magical time for your eyes to be absorbing light. The magical time, because when the sun is rising, when in the morning when the sun rises, you're not getting the strong bright light of like 12 noon, where you literally can't look up at the sun because it's too bright. You're getting what they call infrared light. And when the sun is rising, depending on where you are in the world, you might even see the sun as red or orange. Yeah. And when you see that, it's not intense, but it's very powerful for your health. Like infrared light is so powerful that the people that know about this stuff, like the scientists that really don't talk about melanin, but they know about melanin, they've now created devices that mimic the sunrise. They mimic the infrared light in the morning. So if you go on YouTube, you can get infrared light devices. Um, they've created infrared saunas where people can just sit in a sauna and then they're just getting this infrared light. And if you do your research on infrared light, it literally heals everything. It heals your circadian rhythm, so it can help with your sleep. It can heal DNA, so it can heal your genetic makeup. Anything that's damaged in your DNA, it heals that. It can heal eye problems as well. So all those people that have been told not to look at the sun, if you look at the sun during sunrise and sunset, because you get them at both of those, sunrise and sunset, you'll get infrared light going through your eyes. Great for your any eye health issues as well. Yeah. So that is like the pattern. What I learned after I wrote the book, which I wish I learned before, because I obviously would have put it in the book. But what I learned after I learned wrote the book is that the infrared light, when that goes through your eyes in the morning, that not only activates your pineal gland and starts to heal your DNA, but it prepares your body for the ultraviolet light that you will experience later on in the day. So all of these people that say, "Oh, you know what, I got to put on sunscreen because when I'm out in the sun I get burnt and this sort of stuff," that is because we're not getting the full spectrum of the sun, because the sun literally prepares us for the hottest part. So if you get infrared light in the morning, that prepares your body for the ultraviolet light, which is the quote unquote harmful rays that they always tell us about, that we will experience later on in the day if you're out in the sun. So when you get the infrared light in the morning, that prepares you for the afternoon basically. And then when you get the infrared light in the evening, that prepares you for sleep. And a lot of people around the world are struggling with sleep simply because of, well, many things, but especially the artificial light that we're getting from phones and laptops and being up on streaming sites for however long throughout the night. A lot of people are struggling with sleep. But again, the sun can do something about that. If you get the infrared light before bed, that can prepare you for sleep, which will help with your circadian rhythm.
So that's really amazing because there's a whole industry against the sun. And you even sometimes hear some billionaires that we're not going to name so that they
Mm-hmm.
won't block us on YouTube
That's right. Yeah. 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 Get
talking
free
about
radiation.
they're going to block the sun, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So the sun is good for some people, not good for other people. And some people for who the sun is not good for, they want to block out the sun for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
What can people do about this?
Yeah. So it's a difficult one because, again, one, they don't teach us about melanin. And because they don't teach us about melanin, everyone is confused when it comes to the sun as well. Not just us, because they don't teach anyone about melanin. Only really people who know about melanin are the scientists doing the experiments behind closed doors. And they do the experiments and then don't tell anyone. They find out stuff and be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And then don't tell anyone what they're doing. So, because of that, not only are we all confused with melanin, we're all confused with how the sun works and, what it's supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of propaganda around the sun. And the reason why there's a lot of propaganda around the sun is because the sun literally counteracts a lot of the medication that they give us. And I say us as human beings, not just black people, everyone. The sun can counteract that and mess up the drug. Yeah. So it's like the sun is the enemy to the people that I want us to take drugs and medication and all that sort of stuff. So obviously they're going to tell us, don't look at the sun; it's bad for your eyes. Obviously they're going to tell us, fear mongering. You could get skin cancer, so don't be out in the sun and that sort of stuff. And I said this in my book. I truly believe that science is simple. It's logic backed up by evidence. And your logic is just common sense. You just use your common sense and then back up your common sense with proof. Now, if the sun caused cancer, then we can go back in history, or we should be able to go back in history and see that the places that where the sun was, the hottest and they're getting the most sun, there should be the most cancer cases there or skin cancer cases there. Guess where you get the most sun? On the equator. Guess what? Continent. Guess what? Place is on the, well, there's few, but the main one is Africa and the Caribbean and other places like that. So if the sun caused skin cancer, that would mean that historically we should be getting it more. The history shows that we weren't getting it, but lighter skinned and white people have been getting it. And since it started, because it's quite a new disease, they only started to really record skin cancer cases about 50, maybe 60 years ago. So it's quite a new disease. Since they've started to record it, it's been going up and up and up. Now, if the sun causes it, that would mean one of two things. Either the sun's getting hotter, or we as a human race are out in the sun more than we were 50 years ago. And again, just we could go back in history and look at images and see that we were out in the sun more 50 years ago than we were today. Today, everyone's indoors. Today, everyone's on their phones. Today, everyone's on their laptops. Today, there's high-rise buildings that are blocking out the sun. So we're getting less sun today than we were 50 years ago. Less sun today. You got to think, we as black people, we used to be out in the sun all day. We used to work out in the sun. We used to teach our our children out in the sun. The schools used to be outside in the sun. So we used to be out in the sun for hours. Nowadays, Even if someone lives in a hot country, ask them how many hours they spend out in the sun. It may, if they're lucky, just be 1 hour. So we're out in the sun less now than we were 50 years ago. And then add on top of that the invention of sunscreen and sunblock, which was again about 50 years ago. If those things work, then again, just using logic and evidence, we should see cases going down, cases of skin cancer. But since the invention of sunscreen, the cases have been going up. So skin cancer is going up, but yet we're out in the sun less, and many of us are wearing sunscreen. So how come skin cancer is going up? Just using logic, just using common sense. I haven't even dropped any science on that, but just using logic, you gotta just ask questions when it comes to science because unfortunately, they do not tell us the truth when it comes to melanin. They just don't tell us the truth. And I mentioned that in the book. I call melanin the elephant in the room. They never want to mention the elephant in the room, even though it's the big elephant that everyone can see. Yeah, they don't want to
Wow.
mention.
That's amazing. They'll tell you it's coincidences. So, what another coincidence that we may notice then is that actually in our ancestors' time, they even called our ancestors sun worshippers. Like,
Hmm.
this is something that has come up. Oh, they worship the sun. And
Hmm.
now, as you speak about the sun, I'm like, hmm, did they worship the sun or did they actually know the importance of the sun? And
Right.
that's precisely why they celebrate the sun and they illustrate the sun in everything and
Hmm.
they worship the sun, you know,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
of just how important that the sun is uh, to to everyone, you know.
Exactly. And you can look at that as like propaganda as well because can you imagine if aliens came down to Earth and they were observing human beings and they saw that every time human beings woke up, the first thing they'd do is drink a glass of water. And then throughout the day, they were drinking water. Can you imagine if the aliens turned around and then said, oh, these humans, they worship water? It doesn't make sense. Yeah. We just understand how important water is to our health. So that's why we drink it. It's the same with the sun. When we were out in Africa, we just understand how important the sun is to our health, yeah, and to life, because it always goes back to life. Melanin is the chemical key to life. Ancient Kemet was all about life. Even the pyramids, all that sort of stuff, they tried to make it about death and about mummies and that sort of stuff. It was all about life, yeah. Everything was about life back in ancient Kemet. So when these people who are not from ancient Kemet come in now, they're like, oh, look at these sun worshippers. Why are they always out in the sun? Why have they got these images of, them holding up things to the sun and that sort of? They're sun worshippers. They're sun worshippers. Yeah. So we need to understand who's telling us these things and understand and try and I say this in the book as well. Try and pick the sense from the nonsense. When people are saying stuff to you, you gotta try and pick the sense from the nonsense.
Mm. And if we are sun worshippers, what are the people who are trying to block out the sun? Are they anti-sun?
Exactly. And why would you want to do that? When we understand how the plants grow, and that's why I mentioned photosynthesis in the book, where all of our children are taught about photosynthesis, which is a process of life. It's a process of plant life. So every single child in every school all over the world is taught about photosynthesis, how the plants absorb light because of a pigment called chlorophyll. The plant can absorb light, and then with water and carbon dioxide, there's a process that happens inside of the plant, and the result is oxygen and glucose. The oxygen, the plant releases it in the air, and then the glucose is used to kind of power up that's like the energy for the plant. Now, the reason why we're all taught this is because it's a process of life. In other words, if we don't know, like if photosynthesis doesn't happen, we can't live. We can't live. So even if you're someone who eats meat, you eat the meat that you eat the animals that eat the plants. There's no way these animals can live without photosynthesis. There's no way we can live without photosynthesis. So we have to teach children, or they'll be confused on how the world works. Well, if you understand that, you can understand why not teaching children about melanin creates a lot of confusion. Because according to even European scientists, what chlorophyll can do with regards to absorbing light and then processes, chemical processes happening in plants, is exactly what melanin does in human life, but on a grander scale. So chlorophyll can only absorb certain frequencies of light. That's the reason why the plant is green, because it can only absorb certain frequencies. Melanin can absorb all the frequencies of light. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, all the visible light frequencies and the invisible ones, ultraviolet light, infrared light. It can absorb all of them. So if you're going to teach children about photosynthesis and chlorophyll, the green pigment, why not teach children about the black pigment? Because both pigments are involved in life. One of them is involved in plant life, the other one is involved in human life. So why teach children how plants work and plant life, but not going to teach children about human life? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like know about the plants, but don't know about thyself.
Exactly. And then there becomes a disconnect because there's a connection between the green and the black. That's the reason why, going back to ancient Kemet, they used to call Wasir, they used to call him Lord of the Perfect Black. And like you said, sometimes he was depicted black, but sometimes he was depicted green. That shows you the relationship we have with the plants, the black and the green. And check this out, when the plants breathe, they breathe out something that we breathe in. They breathe out oxygen, we breathe it in. And guess what? What we breathe out, they breathe in. So we breathe out carbon dioxide and they breathe that in. So in order for us to continue with our life, we need what they breathe out. And in order for the plants to continue with their life, they need what we breathe out, which is the carbon dioxide. So there's like a symbiotic relationship between the two. Another reason why, if you're going to teach them about plant life and the greenery and greening and, chlorophyll, then it makes sense to teach them about blackness and melanin because they kind of go hand in hand. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two.
Wow, that is so amazing because in our African culture, even the whole process of humans, they can be likened to plants that are being
Hmm.
raised and that will one day give a harvest.
Hmm.
Plants that need spiritual cultivation in order to one day give a harvest. So,
Yeah,
oh wow, that's amazing. So it's like we're plants on another level because we also have to be cultivated and then brought up and then be harvested as well.
yeah.
So when you speak about the property of black versus white, within the melanin level of understanding,
Hmm.
it inspired me to think about racism, white
Yeah.
supremacy, black versus white. Can we say that racism, the whole black versus white thing, is actually also kind of behaving like melanin in the terms that black is the color that accepts all colors, that absorbs all colors. So the black culture and black people themselves, they are kind of like that, like the color black, which accepts everyone, which loves everyone, which feels connected to everyone. And then the
Hmm.
color white rejects all light, rejects
Hmm.
everything. That's where the racist white supremacy comes in, white rejecting everyone and being exclusive, wanting to be just white. You
Yeah.
think that's kind of related? Is
Yeah,
that why
it's a really
racism would
good.
exist?
That is a really good analogy. That is a really good analogy. I've never looked at it that way. and it was not Dr. Leila, I forgot, Dr. What was her name again? Dr. Frances Cress Wilson. She wrote the book, The ISIS Papers, and she basically said that this melanin is the reason for racism. So she believes that because they're not capable of producing color, yeah, and the fact that that white does reject. So when it comes on to fertility, there's going to be issues, and that means that someone who does produce color can kind of be a threat to someone who doesn't, because if they mix, then the person who can produce color is going to produce color with the person who can't. So if a black person goes with a white woman, their children will be melanated, their children will have color. And her thesis for racism was that's a fear for a lot of powerful white men who believe that, the white race is dying out. So we need to make sure that one, there's no race mixing, and two, we continue to be in a supreme position over these people so they don't dominate us genetically or physically. Because we already, if you look at sports, we already dominate physically. So they were like, we can't allow you guys to dominate us in any other field. Yeah, you guys can have the sports because we control the sports anyway. So we are the ones behind the scenes controlling you guys who are winning all the gold medals anyway. But if we allow them the same way we allow them in sport, where it's an even playing field, if we allow an even playing field in any other industry, then they could dominate. So they will never allow us to dominate science. They will never allow us to dominate the medical industry, because they believe if we do, we take over. Now, what you're saying with regards to how black works is how black people work. So we're very welcoming, maybe too welcoming, maybe to our detriment, because we like to welcome all people into our cultures. Hey, look, come in. This is our language. This is our dance. This is how we dance. This is how we talk. We welcome everyone, and that's black. Black welcomes all colors and in harmony as well. So black can absorb all the colors and create harmony, and that harmony is blackness. Whereas white rejects all colors, all light. Yeah, so there's confusion, because if you looked like up at the sun at 12 noon, that's when you're getting all of the light frequencies going towards your eye. And because it's too much for your eyes, you see white. So there's confusion when it comes to whiteness, but there's harmony when it comes to blackness. And when I'm saying whiteness and blackness, I am talking about a process. Because again, going back to what we said at the start, we shouldn't be dealing with dead language when it comes on to us as African people. We're into life. Everything about us is life, rhythm, yeah, life, music, all of it is life. So when I say black, I don't mean black as a dead color. I mean black as a process. Black is a process of absorption. Yeah. Black is a process. So I'm not talking about black people necessarily. I'm talking about black as a process. And if you look at it like that, then you have a different perspective on blackness. Yeah. Because blackness is the absorption of all light. Blackness, you could argue, blackness is the ultimate enlightenment. Because when they talk about becoming enlightened, if you literally take the word enlightened, means you having more light, more knowledge, more information. Yeah, I've become enlightened. I can see the light. Well, becoming enlightened means you've absorbed more light. The more light you absorb, all the different frequencies, results in blackness. So blackness is the ultimate enlightenment.
Wow. This connects me to, once again, in our African culture where black represents life, and even the word ikara or mukara representing the carbon and that light, versus white, which represents death. Because in many African societies, when people actually die, when black people die, they turn white. And then
Mm,
when they're celebrating the dead, or when they're going to bury the dead, they all dress in white, and
mm,
white representing that idea of death, rejection of of light,
yeah.
which black representing life, because the seed that they plant that will give harvest, the seed is black. You know
Yeah,
what I
the
mean?
seeds are always black, even in your fruits. You look at watermelons, the seeds should be black. These days, we're consuming like GMO watermelons, and sometimes you see white seeds. But your seeds, most of the seeds in most of the fruits, they should be black. Soursop seeds and all of these types of seeds, they should be black because that means they've got the most melanin. Yeah, the most melanin. And remember, melanin is the chemical key to life. So even if you want life in fruits, you need to be having the black seeds. And it's very interesting what you said with regards to life and death and the colors that we wear, because again, going back to ancient Kemet, they've always tried to associate ancient Kemet with death. You know, even they called it the book of the dead. Yeah, the book of the dead is associated with Kemet, but that's not its original name. Its original name wasn't the book of the dead. It, the original name, I can't remember the actual term, but it relates.
Coming forth by the day.
Yeah, that's the translation. Coming forth by day. I was trying to think of the actual
The original thing.
yeah, but the translation is coming forth by day. In other words, life. Yeah. So everything about ancient Kemet was about life, but the people who conquered, this is why it's very important to understand history, because the the people who conquer a nation, they can then write about it, and because they conquered it, you have to go with what they say. Yeah. So when ancient Kemet was conquered, now these people tried to make ancient Kemet about death, the Book of the Dead. The pyramids are about dead people. The mummies are about dead people. And then they even created a language around death as well. Back in ancient Kemet, there was hieroglyphs that represented pyramids. Yeah, there was two hieroglyphs, and each hieroglyph represented like a letter, and the letters that represented a pyramid were MR, mer, and or more. And I've done a presentation on ancient Kemet where I break down the language of MR, and basically because it was MR, over the years put people tried to pronunciate the MR. So over the years, even one of my master teachers, Professor Kaba Hayawasa Kamane, he pronounced it as mer. So in other words, he put an E in between the M and the R, mer. And you might, if you do some research on ancient Kemet, you might see a lot of people pronounce it as mer. That was the original name of the pyramids. But some people pronounce it as more. So they'll put a O in between, more. Yeah. So it can be pronounced as mer or more, but it's MR. And then when you break down what MR really means in ancient Kemet, it means head of water. That's what mer or more really means. It means head of water. In other words, the pyramids were the heads of water. Yeah. And again, water is all about life. So the pyramids represented the controlling of water because they had underneath the pyramids, they had like a water system, and that water system led onto the river Nile. Yeah. So it was like the pyramids were controlling the water system in ancient Kemet. And if you control the water system, you're literally controlling life. And that's why the pyramids were called head of water. We are literally controlling the life of this area. Yeah. But the people that came into Kemet and conquered Kemet, they don't want people to know that it's all about life. So guess what? Easiest way to confuse someone is to flip it, literally flip it on its head. So guess what? Since ancient Kemet, they brought people in and changed the name. So it's not Kemet, it's Egypt, made a subject around it, Egyptology, just so they could make sure that everyone follows their narrative. And then they made sure that everything was about death. Book of the dead. More means dead. So even with the pyramids, they're called Moors, which meant life. But the English language even to this day, anything that's associated with more means dead. Yeah, mortgage, that's a dead contract. Mortgage or morgue. You take someone to the morgue. Mourning, when you're mourning someone's death. Everything like that root word more is to do with death. Yeah. Mortality, mortal. Yeah. It's all to do with death because that's what they did with our culture. They literally flipped it. Our culture was all about life, but they flipped it and made our culture all about death. So guess what? Even to this day, a lot of us, when someone dies here in the West, what color do we wear? We wear black because we've been taught that the color black and more is to do with death. So we're so backwards. We've been taught everything so backwards.
Which is the exact opposite of the African.
Exact opposite of what it should be. So we, to this day, we associate blackness with death and whiteness with life. Yeah. Even the people who are Christian, who believe in Jesus and God, they associate heaven with whiteness. Heaven's this white place, yeah, and Jesus wears white, yeah, and then hell's this dark place where it's hot, yeah. Remember, think about who's teaching us. Heaven seems like this white place where, if you think about visually, it looks cold, whereas hell is this dark place which is extremely hot. But again, going back in history, where do we come from? We come from extremely hot places,
So Africa is hell, Europe is heaven.
right? And
And
even going
in
with that,
French is self-evident. The word more is actually means death in French.
that's right. Yeah, nearly every word that's got the more as the root word is going to be associated with death. That's why people say, even to this day, some people will say, "Oh, don't say good morning because you're mourning someone." Because more means death. So you don't want to be mourning someone. Now, that is true because more does mean death, but we need to understand why it means death. And it's because back in ancient Kemet, they flipped that language. Because initially, more or mer, however you want to pronounce how the pyramids, the MR, meant life. It literally meant head of water. It meant life.
And funny enough, even in French, it's self-evident because mer means the ocean, water.
There you
So
go.
you can
Yeah,
see how within a few letters it can be switched. So from mer to more, you
yeah.
can see the switch. In French, it's so self-evident.
Yeah, and that's why I
Ah,
love the language. There's another presentation. It's on my YouTube. It's called the Hidden Science of Black Love. In that presentation, I break down the language, ancient Kemet, and I break down the hieroglyphs and what they truly mean, and then I break down the word mer or more again, and then because I'm familiar with the fact that we've kind of kept that head of water throughout our languages. So this goes all the way back to ancient Kemet. Mer or more, however you want to pronounce it, meant water, head of water. We've kept that in our culture for so long since ancient Kemet that at this lecture called the Hidden Science of Black Love, I was at university and I was saying to people, to this day we still associate MR or MA or ME with water. And then I was like, I'm going to prove it now. And then I started asking people, who's from what part of Africa are you from? So people started putting up their hands. I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the other parts of Africa. And I was like, what's the word for water in your country? And
exactly.
all of the words
This-
of water in pretty much every African country had MA in it, or ME, or MR, or MO. So we've kept that. We've kept that water associated with M, and then whatever goes after M. Yeah,
Right
pretty
there,
much
I put
in
right
every.
there in our language in Kenya, Rwanda, amazi. This is how we say water. It's self-evident what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying in an African language. Even in Swahili, it's maji. So you can see,
Maji. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you can see it, maji,
Yeah.
which also
Maji.
refers to magic, right?
There
It's
you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Magic. Yeah.
and
And then
and
if
then
you
it
take it
also
all the
brings
way
me
back to ancient Kemet, they believed that the pyramids were magic. They were magical. There was something magical about them. So again, it doesn't mean one thing. It means water. It means magic. It means life. It means that is a language that is living as opposed to a language that is dead.
Wow. And then when you talk about mare, it reminds me of the mermaid, the
Mm-hmm.
ocean lady, which in the African culture we have the mamiwata,
Mm-hmm.
the head, with the thing. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
it's so amazing. It's so amazing.
And because we don't know this, it's easy for them to confuse us and make us think the opposite. So instead of us thinking that black should be associated with life, we think black is associated with death because literally that's how we've been taught since we've been born. And again, going back to people who are religious and even Christians and that sort of stuff, in the Bible, they talk about the mark of the beast, the mark of the devil, the mark of the beast. And that